Hey everyone, this is CM Peters. You're used to hearing TJ Hodder with the Hodder Show, but no, today I'm taking control because today is a special day. Yes, TJ's there, but as the person being interviewed is instead of the interviewer. Hello, Mr. Hodder.
Hello, CM. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, my friend. I'm excited to talk to you. This is already weird,
Yeah,
but it's good. I'm really excited to do this with you.
it must be very different to be on the other side instead of the person asking the question.
Yeah, it's something I've done. I mean, I can count on one hand, two
Yeah.
hands. What do I do with my hands? The amount of times I've been interviewed. Mostly shout outs to a chat with Matt, my buddy Matt Lane. I've been on his podcast a couple of times, but otherwise, I haven't done a lot of interviews. I did something similar to this years ago with my buddy John Ward. Shoutouts to him from Nothing Serious. But that was more of like just like kind of a random, fun little it was like, why do you like Nickelback and stuff like that? So it was very different from what we're going to do today.
A question that all Canadians get asked: why do you like Nickelback?
Yeah, it's because they're awesome. Next question.
Exactly. But today we're not here to talk about Nickelback. We're here to talk about the Hodder Show because today you're celebrating 8 years of the Hodder Show. So we're going to look back together on stuff that was special, episodes that were important, people that were important to you during those 8 years. And I want to know from the start, how did the Hodder Show start?
So it's really funny. Basically, to quickly tell the story of how the Hodder Show starts, I have to go a little bit back to my time working at Gigs Music, which was a music store I worked at, somewhat locally to where I am. And while I was there, I always loved when musicians would come into the store for the first time. And I would want to get to know them. I've always been that way with music. I'd be like, who's the guy who plays guitar in this band? Who does he like? What gear does he use? I've always been very curious about that kind of stuff for one reason or another. So musicians would come into the store and I'd almost interview them. It was almost like a bad joke because I had a couple of people say oh, you guys got to go see TJ and get interviewed because I'd want to know everything about them. So I could then provide.
Cool because you provide a better service.
Right. If I know who you want to sound like, what stuff you like, what you're going for as a band, I can then provide better service. So I kind of always was into doing that. And as I got to know kind of the regulars and the teachers and stuff like that, I'd always have stories to tell and stuff like that. As you know, CM, I like to tell stories.
Just a bit, just a
yes. And I ended up, it was almost like a bad joke where people were like, oh, you're going to have to write a book with all the stories you have. And I always made that joke of, oh, I'm going to write a book. Oh, this story's going in the book. Anytime something funny would happen. And then after the store closed and I moved on from that, I went through this very weird period of time where obviously music was my first creative love. And I was very sad because, the store had closed. I moved on from that and I just wasn't as into music. So that's when I started getting really heavily into podcasting. So the joke turned from, oh, I'm going to write a book to, oh, I'm going to start a podcast. And I would talk with my beautiful, wonderful wife, Sam, about it, or my friends or whatever. I'd always talk about, the podcast. And one night I was going to join a friend of mine, Mr. Brandon Bowden, on his YouTube channel at the time. He was doing he did game streaming and stuff like that. Shout out to Your Average Noob Gaming. But he was doing specifically a professional wrestling channel called Your Average Noob Wrestling. Super creative, I know. And I was going to join him basically I had been on a couple of times just to kind of talk. And I was going to join him to do my own content on his channel. Because I was really craving to do something creative. As things happened that night, something came through. He ended up having to cancel on me. And I'm sitting in my living room at the time. And I was like, I am firing on all cylinders. I feel so creative. I feel I had this super creative energy. And
I got to do something with it.
Exactly. And I was like, this podcast thing. If I did a podcast, I could call it a hodcast. And then I laughed for like 5 minutes just as it was just the dumbest thing. And I was like, okay, could I do a podcast? Could I actually sit down, record myself speaking into a microphone, edit it, make it sound okay? Because it's coming from me, so like people know my history. So I'm like, I have to at least make it sound okay. It just so happened I had an old microphone that my boss from the music store gave me before we closed down, because I had talked about doing a podcast. So he was like, oh, take this for your podcast. So I had that. I just so happened to have an adapter that plugged that microphone into my iPod at the time.
Ooh,
and I just so
Technology 101.
Yes, and I just so happened to have GarageBand. And I sat down that night and recorded the first episode of the Hodder Show, as you guys can still hear it. Nothing's changed on it, which is about, I think it's about 15 to 20 minutes of just me basically saying, I start off talking about, like, I make the Hodcast joke. And like, that was like all I had prepared, really, was just to be like, hey guys, I'm starting a podcast. Or as I'm probably going to call it, a Hodcast. And then from there, I basically spent 15 minutes talking about, hey guys, I'm going to do a podcast. And for whatever reason, I showed it to my wonderful wife and she was like, this is so cool. Like, I think she was just surprised I actually went through with it because I talked about it so much. Mm-hmm. And from there, I told the story of Gigs Music and what happened there, which people would always ask me about. So I was like, here, just take this. Now you all know. And it was pretty good. From there, I had a couple of friends on to kind of do interviews and ended up falling in love with doing that more than like the bloggy type stuff I was doing in the beginning. So the show kind of evolved into that and music stuff in between there. And here we are.
And now you're close to 400 episodes.
Yes, very close. As this is being recorded, I just 389 question mark. This is going to be, I can give you the official number here. I think it's 380. This is actually going to be episode 390 of the Hodder Show. This episode right here. So we are, and technically speaking, there's been over 400 episodes. But like official.
Have you deleted some?
No, actually. So I do this fun. So my toxic trait is I will be like, oh, especially in the early days, I'd be like, oh, here's a special. And I wouldn't like number it. So now I'm like, bro, if I had numbered it, I'd have like over 430 episodes at this point, I think. I don't know why I did that. I still do that sometimes too. Like the 5th year anniversary special. I just called it the 5th year anniversary special. You know what I mean? Like I do weird, fun things like that. So
Exactly. So we saw in those 390 something episode, 8 years, the start of the show, how it grew, but it went through different phases. One of them being the network days. You had started a network.
Yes, that was the Podbeard Network. Super fun, creative name. I was wanting to do a network for a long time. At this point in time, I had no business doing a network. It was like I basically wanted an umbrella for all the shows I was doing, which I'll get into in a sec.
Because there's more than the Hodder Show. For people this is the first episode you listen to, there were other podcasts before the Hodder Show.
So they were technically during the Hodder Show. So like I did
side ones.
Yeah, little side ones that I did. I did spin-off shows, if that makes sense.
Yes.
That was probably the best way to term it. So I wanted like an umbrella for all that content that I was doing. And then also I wanted to bring my friends in and just be like, hey, we're all friends. We're all doing creative stuff. Let's just go under a banner so we can all support each other. At one point, we legit had sponsorships for certain things. There was a bit of money involved near the end, which is always really cool. So it was just like a really fun way to all be under the same banner, but then also help each other grow, hopefully. And if we can all make a little bit of money,
why not?
Why not, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
if you get a sponsorship, it's like, well, you're not just getting me. You're not just getting the Hodder Show. You're also getting Mikes and Beers, Two Guys in a Game, Boy Stick, Honest Lazy Show, Dark Runner, Creeper Sleep, among others. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. Still Loading Podcast, No Geeks Allowed. Like, it just made sense to do that to me. And it was a really fun experience. I learned a lot about what not to do when you're doing a network and working with other people.
There's a lesson in everything.
Exactly. And for me, during that time frame, the Hodder Show was, I believe I was past episode 200 at that point. I want to say I was well past 200. So I was really in my groove with the Hodder Show. I really felt like I was dialed in. I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew that I could more or less, this is a terrible thing to say, to admit, but it was almost like at the time I still had Brandon doing production. So I could like just record an episode of the Hodder Show, give it to him, and not even give it a second thought until I had to post it. So, and I was very ahead at the time because I was doing other projects. So at the time, it's almost like the Hodder Show kind of, not autopilot isn't the right term, because I still obviously put a lot of care into it, but it was like, I didn't have to think about it as much as I did the other content I was doing. Because
it's a different process.
Yes. And because I was so comfortable with it. So it's like now I do the Hodder Show. I just have fun and we just have a good time at this point.
It comes naturally to you.
It's like we're just sitting around at a barbecue shooting the breeze. Like there's no nervousness or there's no extensive, pre-interviews and stuff like that. Like, it's like, let's just have some fun and have a chat about something, which is what I like. So at that time, I was really honing in on that. So when I had two spin-off shows, one was Mikes and Beers, which was technically the first spin-off show, which was literally just me and my friends sitting around drinking beer and talking shit on microphones, which was a great time. And it started off as a segment on the Hodder Show and then grew into a monthly podcast for Podbeard Network that I had with my friend Ryan Wood and Sam Luxton eventually, or Craft Woody, excuse me, and Sam. We ended up having a great time with that, and it was a lot of fun. Then at the same time, I also met a friend of mine, Kaz was his name. Well, still is his name. Shout out to my buddy Kaz. Well, I guess the character was Cazador Jones was his full name on the show. And I was just Hodder because I'm not that creative.
It's you.
I'm not that creative. I'm like, I think because it was like Two Guys in a Game was, I call it the worst gaming podcast in history because yes, it was a gaming podcast. And yes, it was generally themed around gaming. But also we were just two goofballs who just wanted to basically work on something together. And we had so much fun doing just the stupidest shit. We had like opening skits for every episode where we do like dumb voices and stuff. We were both super into Rick and Morty at the time. So like we would always do like Rick and Morty sketches and shit. And it was such a fun project. And I look back so fondly on that time period because I really grew as a podcaster and as a creator. And my only thing I will always say about that time frame, and I talk about this quite a bit, but I look back on that time frame and I wish I would have forced myself to kind of stop and smell the roses a bit more, if that makes sense. Because I was so like, I was running so hard because I was doing so much at the time. I was also doing production for a couple other things and trying to get sponsorships, and like I was having fun, but like sometimes it would be like, I know I wasn't always the easiest person to deal with, which, me and Kaz always were very open. It was more with Two Guys in a Game just because like, and I've talked about this before, but like, be like, hey man, like not everything has to be so serious. Like take a breath. It's okay.
Exactly. If we don't smell, like you said, smell the roses.
Exactly. And I always say to people like, like if you're doing anything creative, rule number one is have fun, man. And if it's not fun, don't do it.
Exactly.
And that's
a way of living, period.
Absolutely. Like, if something's not fun, don't do it. And if something you know you love, but maybe you're just burnt out on, is turning that way for you, take a step back. That's okay.
Yep,
If you
exactly.
don't come back to it, that's cool as well. But like, Two Guys in a Game ended because I got way too burnt out on podcasting, and Two Guys in a Game suffered near the end. It ended up was what caused that to end. But then also, I had no business doing a gaming podcast. So there's that too. That's the other 50% of it. But that whole the network days were like, I look back on it all so fondly because I got to really hone in on my craft, and I really learned a lot, and I got to work with some really amazing people that to this day are still friends of mine, you know? So it was really cool and a really fun process, the whole thing.
That's a great time. I went a bit too fast. I talked about the network days before I talked about the pandemic era, because those kind of, they go together and not. But the pandemic era of your podcast is when most of it happened because, we couldn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with the pandemic era, it was like, at that point, I was really already, it was kind of also actually technically near the end days of the network. So I'm trying to think of the exact timeline. So like the network was kind of coming to an end during the vid. And it was so interesting because for pretty much everyone else in the world, everyone was stuck at home. And
but you were not.
Yeah, I worked the entire pandemic, which I'm super grateful for that because a lot of people didn't have that option. And as much as during that time frame, I joked around about like, oh man, I wish I was stuck at home so I could do all this stuff. Like looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I said stuff like that because like, it was so ignorant, but like, it was really cool because there were so many wonderful creators that got their start during the pandemic era. And
that's true.
For me, it was almost like things kept going. Like nothing really changed too much for me aside from the fact that I didn't do anything in person anymore. Which I still don't really just because of where I live now. But like that was like, okay, there's no more in-person interviews. That's a thing of the past now. So I got to have some really cool things happen in that time frame where I got to have some interviews, specifically one interview that I don't know if it would have happened if it wasn't for the pandemic. And it was one of my favorite ones to this day, just because of who it was. During that pandemic era, I got to have a chat with a man by the name of Hoogie on the Road, or Jeremy Donays, who is the touring bass and guitar tech for Shinedown.
Yes.
And I've been, as a former guitar tech, I was following his career for years and years and years and years. So I ended up getting linked up with him through Meanbeard, actually. Shouts to Meanbeard. And it was just like, hey, this podcast guy, TJ, he's a big fan of yours. Like, he'd love to talk with you. And he was like, what do you mean he's a fan of me? Like, I'm just a guitar tech.
It's supposed to be the other way around.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, no, man. Like, I've been following your career for years. So to get to talk with him, I know that would not have happened without the pandemic happening. So like, even though during that time frame, the network also did come to an end, we had the one and only Podbeard Network crossover episode, which was kind of hilarious now to look back on and think about. But to me, it was like, it's so funny because looking back in that time frame, like it was when so many people were just like pumping out content like daily. And I was just kind of doing the same thing I've always done. So would I have liked to have had a little more time to maybe try and do like bi-weekly for the Hodder Show again? Because I did do that in the early days. Maybe. But I think for me, just getting to see so many brilliant creators get their start. I mentioned my friend Matt Lane earlier, Chat with Matt, started as an Instagram podcast. And he then grew from there into just doing a normal podcast. And to watch things like that happen was so fun. And even that time frame, even though two guys in a game had come to an end, we got back together for like, the pandemic reunion episode and stuff like that. So it's funny because it feels like it was such a big time frame, but in the 8 years of the Hodder Show, it was really only it was really only 1 year, and nothing really happened that was that exciting when I look back on it. Like, it was just kind of business as usual, like I got to meet a lot of people who, unfortunately, who are no longer doing podcasts, but like that started podcasts during that time frame. So I learned a lot about myself as far as giving advice to people who want to start podcasts and stuff like that. That's when I really started to hone in on like, okay, what mistakes have I made in the past in regards to podcasting that can hopefully help someone along the way.
Exactly.
You and I have had this conversation where I always say, listen, if someone wants to know how to do a successful podcast, I can't help you. However, over the last 8 years, I have made a lot of mistakes. And
here's not how not to do them.
Exactly. Here's how not to do a podcast, basically, is almost how I word things now.
That's your book.
Yeah.
How not to do a podcast.
How to not do a successful podcast. Like
Exactly. But reminder, to have a successful podcast, you have to have collaborators.
Yes.
And you had a few that we need to talk about. First of all, I call him your graphics guy, Jason, who's been a big help to you.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. So I have known my friend Jason for pretty much the whole 8 years I've been doing podcasting, which is wild to think about, the fact that we've been collaborating this long and on other projects, not just the Hodder Show. He did everything for Two Guys in a Game, Mics and Beers, every dumb, silly little project I've ever wanted to do. He's that poor man. I have put him through the ringer.
He's always there.
The amount of times I have sent him like designs on like a napkin and be like, here's what I'm thinking. And I have no artistic ability at all when it comes to art. So
you're matchsticks like me?
Yeah, it's even worse. Dude, it's bad.
Oh,
dude.
wow.
It's bad. A quick funny story on that. So with Podbeard Network, first off, Podbeard Network, the name, I forgot to mention this. So the name, as silly as it was so stupid how it came to be, because I was stressing out about it. And I was talking with my friend Brandon, who was kind of involved with it with me in the beginning too, about, like, oh, we're going to name this network. This is, oh man. And then he said, and I quote, "The name is probably right under your nose." And I looked down and I went, Podbeard. And here we are. So in that time frame, I drew literally like on a napkin. I was at my old job. I grabbed a napkin and drew a horrible bearded face with headphones on it and a microphone in front of it, and sent that to Jason. And I was like, here you go.
Here's what I want.
And he, first try, he nailed exactly what I wanted, but made it look obviously way better. And I was like, hell yeah. So that's my man, Jay. But I ended up meeting Jason. It was right around like episode, like, I think 20. Because at that time I was looking for someone to do some t-shirts for me. Excuse me. Because I had my first live episode, which is hilarious to look back on. My first live episode was episode 30, and I was doing like a live stream type thing. So I posted on Facebook, hey, I'm looking for someone to do a t-shirt. And I'm very thankful to this one person, because even though shenanigans ensued afterwards, this person typed Jason's name and tagged him in this thing and said, this is the guy, hit him up. And I think he commented right away. We ended up linking up for a chat. And I was like, yo, this dude works with like Tommy Dreamer's House of Hardcore. He's like a horror guy. He loves metal. Like, this is awesome.
This is meant to be.
Exactly. I sent him, he's like, do you have any ideas? I was like, And I think he sent back the design, the original OG Hodder Show logo. He sent it back. And I think first try, it was like, that's perfect. That is exactly what I want. But I didn't know I wanted it. And from there, We have worked on so much together. Everything that has to do with the show, as far as graphic stuff, like social media, banners, even like the graphic overlays for things that I would do, the interview tiles that I have, everything that comes to how the Hodder Show looks is all 100% from Jason from Jaybird Digital Arts. And having him being a collaborator on that has helped me so much to have the confidence to just be creative and not have to worry so much about, oh, does this make sense? Because I can just say to him, hey man, does this make sense? And 9 times out of 10, he's like, that's exactly what I was thinking too. So
you're connected.
We're on that wavelength where, we're well past just having a working relationship. Like I genuinely consider him like my older brother now. He's family. And that man has talked me off the proverbial ledge with podcasting a couple of times. Just, what do you mean? What are you doing? Stop. It's just how he is. And I love him and his family dearly. And we've had so much fun together going to the Chinlock wrestling shows and stuff like that. Having him involved with Mikes and Beers, Two Guys in a Game specifically, he ended up doing something out of his comfort zone a little bit with Two Guys in a Game, where he did cartoon versions of myself and Kaz, which I still use that cartoon Hodder from time to time, especially on my Discord. So it's like, it's just so fun to be able to really explore this world with him, so to speak. And anytime I think that I want to change something, or maybe this is getting a little stale, or he even will come to me with stuff and be like, hey, like this interview tile, we've used it for a little while. It's cool. How about this? Or how about this?
Yeah.
Or how about this? And 99% of the time I'm like, oh, hell yeah. It's just, we have it dialed in now. There's been times where it's like scary how much on the same wavelength we are. Where, I used to call them music reviews, but now I call them music showcases, where basically I have a record or an EP from a band. I play it and then I talk about it, or I have the band on to talk about it, then play it and break the songs down. And when I started doing that originally, it was never really like a music review, if that makes sense. It was like, because I wouldn't like talk smack about anything or critique anything. I would just be like, here's what I like about this song. Here's what I like about this song. Here's what I like about this song. And
is there any song you don't like?
Exactly. It's like, I just like everything, man. I can't help it. And it was like, I knew that, like, that's not a review. And people would say that, like, that's the only critique I really ever got about it, was like, hey, this is cool, but like, just saying you like everything isn't really a review, So I was like, okay, I think I need to change the terminology of it to like a showcase. So I went to go message Jason, and literally when I told him what I was thinking, he said, LOL. And he sent me within seconds the changed graphic that said, like Hodder Show Music Showcase. And I literally was like, dude, get the fuck out of my head. Like, just, it was the creepiest thing, but also the best thing. And just, even like the t-shirt I'm wearing right now with the new Hodder Show logo, that was even like, that was such a big, almost emotional thing to change the logo up a little bit, to make it a little more like, let's just keep evolving. Let's keep things evolving all the time. And he's the best creative partner you could ask for in that regard. And it's just been wonderful having him on this journey and knowing no matter what, he has my back. And that's Jason, awesome. I love you, buddy.
Awesome. And another collaborator you mentioned earlier that used to be your producer, Brendan.
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, Brandon was the kind of one of the catalysts for this whole thing to happen, because he was doing his YouTube show and everything. And when I got started on this, there was definitely a lack of confidence for a very long time. In a lot of ways, there still is. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. Everyone deals with it, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
So Brandon was such a big help, especially in the early days. And in a lot of ways to this day still is. Where, you know, he was someone who, you know, he had worked in the radio world. He was a producer, still is. And also the voiceover world, which he still is. He's a brilliant voiceover artist. So he was really good at helping to teach me basically how to do this. The first interview, quote unquote, that I ever did was basically Brandon just kind of interviewing himself through me, if that makes any sense. It's so interesting to go back and listen to because like, I mean, I cringe listening to the early stuff because like I had no idea what I was doing, but
yeah,
knowing that he would be able to guide the conversation if needed was like, it was so helpful. And having him basically teach me how to do production and how to make things sound a certain way, knowing that I could always ask him for help if I needed it, was so wonderful. And right around episode 50, was it episode 50? It was a little bit later, but I was actually ready to call it quits with podcasting, which is funny because this happened a couple of times. One of which Jason talked me down, but the first one, it was just from a logistical standpoint. I was like, I can't keep creating these episodes because I was doing 2 a week at the time as well, right? So I would record these episodes, edit them, do production on them, upload them, and I did that twice a week. And it was really starting to weigh on me. And
yeah,
so I said to him, like, hey, I think episode 50 is going to be the last one. Because I was like, I at least want to get to 50 episodes that I can say it was about a year. Like, that's cool. Even though it wasn't a year because I was doing 2 a week. It was like, in my mind, I was like, I at least want to get to 50. And he was like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, is it just the production stuff? I'm like, yeah, I just can't keep up anymore. He's like, well, fucker, I'll just do it. Like, it was just like, because also,
is that your only problem? Because I'll take care of it.
He was like, dude, like, what are you talking about? Shut the fuck up. Like, we're doing this. And because he is a master producer, like, he was able to whip through it like nothing. And what still to this day, what takes me hours will take him 5 minutes. Like, it's just insane. But also it's his profession. It's his craft. So that's why he's so good at it.
I see. I understand.
Yes,
that.
of course you do. There's totally not a reason I'm asking you to do this.
No.
But for me, it was like, again, kind of like almost with Jason, knowing that he had my back, knowing that he would also be brutally honest with me because he's still to this day one of my absolute closest best friends in the world and like family, really. So he would, you know, if there was an episode that was particularly rough for one reason or another, he would be the first to say, hey man, what's going on? Like, no, don't do that. Like, don't stay away from that. Don't do that ever again. Or, you know, hey, this episode, yeah, you sound miserable. So you're going to redo it. Like, you don't sound like you're having fun. So that was also helpful, having that at times, not brutal in a bad way. Like, I don't want it to sound like that's like, he would always sugarcoat it really, really nicely because he's my friend. He knows how to talk to me. But like, he'd be like, hey man, like, are you really happy with that? Like, really? And I'd be like, no, I'm lying to myself. And, you know, having that was so, but then also at the same time, having someone who I love and respect so much as a creator himself, and also just as a person, call me up out of the blue sometimes and be like, dude, that episode was awesome. And I'd be like, oh, really? He'd be like, that's one of your best. I'd be like, oh, sweet. Thanks, man. Because he listened.
And it's the kind of thing, it's the kind of thing we need to hear.
Absolutely. As creators, we need to know sometimes that we're doing okay, you know?
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah.
Feedback helps a lot.
Absolutely. And like, for me, it was like just knowing that he would always be honest with me, knowing that he always had my back, knowing that he would always put the show first, but also would put my feelings to heart, if that makes any sense. And he is the catalyst as to why Two Guys in a Game happened. Because when I had my buddy Kaz on, he was like, dude, that guy's your co-host. And he was such a big part of that. He was such a big part of my podcasting life and the network for so many years. And taught me so much about this. And to this day, even though he did have to step away from doing production for the Hodder Show and the network stuff at the time, just because he got too busy with voiceover stuff, which was like, as his friend, when he told me, like, he felt really bad. And I was like, dude, oh,
your career is flourishing.
I was like,
I can only be happy.
Right. I was like, dude, as your friend, like, fuck the Hodder Show. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're, hey, I'm really sorry I can't keep doing this production for your podcast because I'm too busy with my dream. Like, I'm like, dude, like, I literally think I said in the text message, like, fuck the Hodder Show. Like, go do this, man. And to this day, he's still doing it. But I know if push ever comes to shove, I did it just the other day. Where I can say,
Ta-da.
Hey, man, what do you think of this? Or any tips for this? Like, every time I sit down with him, I always learn something. And just, he's one of the...
He's not far.
He's one of the closest people I have in my life. And I'm so grateful for him. And I love you, Brandon. That's all I have left to say about that.
Shout out to Brandon.
Yes.
Another collaborator or so that we could say it like that had a big influence and also helped you push the Hodder Show forward is Jason Wilson, formerly of the Grey Rooms.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, which also was the catalyst for how I was introduced to you and the fine folks that over on the Grey Rooms Discord that we have now become just homies outside of that, which is cool.
Homies. I like that.
Yes, homies. I was like, yo, you're from Quebec. That's cool as shit, bro. I'm Canadian too. Like, hosers for life, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah, what was so funny is in the journey of the Hodder Show, like, I never thought that my creative life would kind of be going the route that it is now, outside of the Hodder Show too, which we'll obviously get to in a little bit. But I, during the pandemic, got super into horror narration podcasts and horror audio dramas, which I was never into before. I don't know what it was about the pandemic that got me into horror. I guess it was like, I would see such crazy things in my everyday life. Like, the main highway in Canada be so dead that I could walk out on it and stand there for 20 minutes before I'd see a car. It was like an episode of The Walking Dead. So I was like,
yep.
I think internally I needed a way to like, how can I like escape from this and channel it? So I discovered shows like SCP Archives, which to this day is still one of my favorites. From there, I discovered the magic that is Mr. Graham Rowett, which I know you also are a big Graham Rowett fan.
Oh, yeah.
We love Graham here. And then from there, I discovered the Grey Rooms, which after listening to for 37 seconds of an episode, I was like, oh, this is like next level. And I got super ridiculously into the Grey Rooms. When I came into the picture, they were just about done season 3, which is wild to think about. I ended up getting super into that, joined the Facebook group after listening to him talk about it so much. And then shout outs to our dear friend Arthur, who I would comment on things. And like, I wanted to be involved with the community because I genuinely loved it so much. But then also, if I'm being honest with myself, I think at the time I knew, even back then, I think even if you asked me like in 2019, 2018, when I started kind of dabbling a little bit in horror narration for like Christmas time and Halloween. I think I was looking for a way to slowly start getting into that world. So I was looking for other creators that I respected that I could just ask questions to. I wasn't necessarily looking to weasel my way into anything, but like I wanted to be able to ask questions, if that makes any sense.
By getting into that world, do you mean having a horror podcast or doing voice acting?
Why not both?
Sure, of course.
I think even back then, if I'm being honest with myself, I knew I wanted to get into voice acting in some way, but I wanted to get into horror voice acting specifically because I felt like I enjoyed that more. As much as I love voice acting outside of that, it's like I really wanted to explore that horror world more because
there was something there for you.
I just channeling that dark energy into narrating a really creepy story or messed up story or weird story, for whatever reason, brings me a weird sense of peace. I don't know why. There's probably something wrong with me, but
to each his own.
As long as it keeps me from going crazy, we're good.
Yep, exactly.
So I think I was kind of looking for like just some people who are kind of in that world or who wanted to get into that world, if that makes any sense. And I wanted to just chat with them because the only creators I really knew outside of that world were so far removed from audio dramas and horror, you know, like shout out to my buddy Josh from Still Loading Podcast, who still to this day is one of my dearest friends I've met in podcasting. Like, you know, he was doing a gaming podcast. That's totally different. My friends are doing game streaming and YouTube stuff. Like, I really needed to meet people who kind of were in the same mindset. So when Arthur was like, hey, you should join our Discord, I was like, what's a Discord? Because all I knew about Discord at the time was just, it was
nothing
for gamers to like talk on while they gamed. And he was like, no, like download it, come join our community. Come to find out that was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, because joining the Discord that night, I was on a stream with a couple of people and also with Jason Wilson, who is the creator of the Grey Rooms and producer. And I was such a fanboy and still in a lot of ways am to this day of Jason, just because of the effect he had on me as a creator in that realm. I'm sitting listening to him edit a podcast and I'm like, holy shit, this is so cool. And then, you know, I'm on a stream with him, actually talking to him. And he was like, oh, what's going on over there? You've got a pretty crisp setup for. I was like, well, you know, I'm a podcaster. He was like, excuse me. I said, I'm a podcaster. He said, what? I said, I'm a podcaster. Because I was still so nervous. I was even like nervous to talk to Arthur. Like I was like, oh my God, this is the Arthur Unk. Like, oh man, this is so cool. So I was like freaking out, and like I want to say like Brooks joined in too at some point, and I was like, oh my God, that's Brooks Bigley. Holy shit, like this is so cool. And as time progressed, I got to meet people like yourself, and you know, we all got to kind of be buddies, and we're just like all roomies of the Grey Rooms, and we're all kind of, a bunch of us were wanting to kind of break into that world. And something cool that happened after we after some time had gone on, and you kind of get to know everybody, and I ended up getting to kind of know Jason a little bit better, and Jason, then also the team behind the Grey Rooms, not just Jason. There was a wonderful team that, you know, he had working with them. Shouts to Cassie and Brooks and Arthur and JM and Graham and everyone, of course. But I ended up having Jason on the Hodder Show for what is still to this day one of the most interesting episodes to listen to, because we both got a little too tipsy before we started. And especially Jason, we were feeling pretty good, especially at the end of it. He was like, dude, I love you, man. Like it was really fun. It was fun for me as a fan, because I was like, oh, we're just two dudes talking at this point. We're buddies. And it meant so much to me to have that and have that relationship with all of them, not just Jason, of course, but like, getting to like, have a beer with Graham and getting to do all this other stuff. Like it's so cool to have had that rapport. But during that episode, after we had finished, he was like, dude, like, what are you doing? What's going on with the Patreon and shit? Like, you gotta get that going again, man. And I was like, no one cares. And he kind of gave me a swift kick in the ass to get the Patreon going. And at that time frame, this was 2021-ish, somewhere in that ballpark, I think. Yeah,
just
somewhere
about,
around there. At that time frame, I started off January. I had just kind of like I had Jason on a couple of weeks after. Right around that time frame, I was very much aware of the fact that the Hodder Show had kind of gone stagnant as far as its growth. I was having fun, and it was great, and it's never stopped being fun, which is awesome. But I was very aware of the fact that, like, hey, we're kind of just staying on this one plateau, and nothing's really happening. And
something's got to move.
Right. I'm like, I need something. I really needed something to almost give justification to what I have done and what I was still wanting to do. I didn't really know what that was, but I was like, I need something. So Jason gave me a swift kick in the ass to get the Patreon going. He ended up joining it with the Grey Rooms to kind of kickstart it. I ended up getting to have enough money to use Adobe Audition again, which was a huge boost for the show and its audio production. From there, the Patreon grew into what it is now, which is awesome. People like yourself, of course. I appreciate it very much. And it was a really good boost. And I was so grateful because that 100% would not have happened without him. He was the one. Would I have maybe eventually started it? Maybe. But he was really the one that kind of gave me that swift kick in the ass to be like, what are you doing? Like you're just hanging out. Like, do something. Like, come on. He didn't word it quite like that, but that was the gist of what he was saying. And from there, as time went on, the Grey Rooms Productions Network came to be. And still, I was kind of looking for something. I didn't really know what it was. And they wanted to have different shows join the Grey Rooms Productions Network. And there was a live stream that was happening at one point while they all met up for Grey Rooms Con or whatever they called it.
In Nashville.
In Nashville, yes. And
I remember that. Yeah.
It just so happened I tuned into this one stream. And I will never forget this as long as I live. I tuned into the stream, and Jason was going off about how he doesn't just want, like, he's like, yes, obviously, they had, some other paranormal related stuff. He wanted like other audio dramas that weren't horror and stuff like that. But he's like, I also just want like different shows as well. I don't just want, quote unquote, like creative storytelling shows. I want to do other stuff. He's like, I want a show like TJ's show, like what he does. And he kept mentioning like TJ's show, like what TJ does. I love what TJ does. We need something like that. And finally, I believe it was Cassie. It was either Cassie or Brooks who said, why don't we just ask TJ? And then he got really quiet and he said, I didn't realize that was an option. I thought he was a part of a network. And they were like,
that must have been a huge confidence boost.
It was. And I was like, just to even be in the conversation, I was like, just him saying, someone who's being successful in the podcast world. I was like, that's cool as shit. So fast forward, there was a meeting scheduled between myself, Jason, and Cassie. And I have talked about this before, so I'm not portraying any trust or anything, but still at this point, as cool as that was, I was like, I still need something. I needed something to just bring everything together, if that makes any sense. And I went into this meeting thinking that they were going to pitch me to be a part of another podcast, either as a producer or joining in with someone else. That's what I thought. That's the rumor I had heard, so to speak, because everyone talks obviously in the community. And
TJ,
I think they're going to ask you to do this. Like, And I was like, that's really cool, but like, I'd have to stop doing the Hodder Show. And I'm like, I don't think I can do that at this point. And I was terrified.
And did you want to do that? It's also, you
Yeah.
can't, and do you want to?
It's so important to also ask yourself that question. Like, do I really want to do this? Or am I just
Yes.
doing it because it's being offered?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do a lot of soul searching, and I ended up at no. I was like, you got to do what makes you happy. And
Yes.
I was like, I don't know if I can be happy doing this. As fun as it would be, if I have to give up this thing I've been doing for, at that point, 6.5 years or whatever, I was like, I can't give up on this now. I got to see this through to the end. No matter, even if it ends this year, I got to finish this off and see this through to the end. So I was basically prepared to say no, or at least no for now. And I sit down for this meeting. Yes, I sit down for this meeting, and thank God we weren't on camera, because basically they start going off about how they have so much respect for what I've done, and you know how hard I have worked, and the blood and the sweat and the tears I've put into this and everything, and how there is value to not only listeners but also a financial value in what you have done. And we want to offer you a spot on our network as you are. Nothing changes. You do exactly what you're doing right now. We might have some suggestions just to help the growth of the show, but it's like, we don't want you to change a damn thing. Do exactly what you're doing. It's like, there is value in what you have done. There's value in you as a creator. And they're telling me this, and I'm literally full on weeping, because I was just like, holy shit, this is what I needed. This validation that, and it wasn't necessarily because there was a financial incentive behind it. It was like,
it's validation of your work.
It's hard to explain. Having that financial incentive, as much as I don't want it, it was like, there really is actual value in this and what you have done. Everything you have done and who you are as a creator, there is actual financial value in this. And also, there's that level of respect from people who are doing this for real. And I was just so blown away. And still in a lot of ways to this day, I am. And that meant and still means so very much to me, that even though as things happen in life, things didn't end up working out, and I hate how that whole situation ended, but like, still to this day, I still have so much love and respect for Jason, because, and I don't really know if he's aware fully of, because I told him straight up, like, you know, it's like, I don't know if you're aware of the fact that not only did you really in a lot of ways save my podcast, but like, you really gave me that kick in the ass to realize that I should have some confidence. I do have some value in what I've done. And it's not, you know, also people like yourself and the whole community there also was a huge part of that as well. But with him, it was like that huge kick in the ass that even though we are from very different worlds, there's value in what you've done. And I'll always be very grateful for that. And I'll always say thank you to Jason for that, because that has basically carried me to this day. And like I said, even though things didn't end the way that anyone wanted them to, it's like, we can still say, hey, that was pretty cool, man. That was a pretty cool thing that happened.
And I'm sure he'll hear this. I
hope so. Shouts to Jason.
Yes. But I think I can say that this whole collaboration, even if it didn't work, brought new things for you, new avenues. And one of them being that you had the chance to do some voice acting and also create tapes of trepidation.
Yes. What is so cool about that? And I really have to give a lot of credit to yourself for really pushing me in that direction too, because if it wasn't for yourself and Tanner and Mo and the whole Baseline Feed team and yourself as well, like I don't like to say I wouldn't have done something, because I don't know how things would turn out, right? But like, if you guys didn't do what you did and what they're still doing and kind of, hey, cast me in roles that terrified the fuck out of me. You mean I have to be,
I remember
you mean
that.
I have to be myself? Oh,
You can do
that's
that.
terrifying. You mean I have to I have to be just basically me and talk in a acting standpoint? Like, what do you mean? Like at that point,
And he killed it.
Thank you. I mean, listen, if I didn't have someone else who's on this call, do such a great job with the production and also being the other person acting in that, maybe it wouldn't have come together as well.
That helps a little. That helps.
Helps a little bit. But like, that was such a big push in that direction where it's like, no, man, like you can do this. Like you really can do this.
Yeah.
And I think I would have been involved in not necessarily the gray rooms itself as a voice actor, but with some of the Patreon stuff they were doing. I probably would have popped up from time to time, but baseline feed is really important to my journey into the voice acting world, because like that was like, okay, this is out of my comfort zone. And from there, now some of the stuff that I'm going to be involved with baseline is a little more my speed. I feel like it's a little more kind of, again, the last one that you were involved with, of course, as we're recording this, Exit 95, I'm like, that is generally one of my proudest pieces of creative anything I've ever been involved with. And that's major hats off to you and Evan Jaffe for writing it, because if you didn't do what you did production-wise, sound design-wise, music-wise, obviously Eric and Sig having a huge part in it as well. If Eric didn't play it the way that he did, I would have sounded weird, like there's a lot of things that go into it, but like, I'm so proud of that. And having all of that happen and meeting all you guys and the pushing in the direction of like, hey man, like you got something here. You're not crazy. So when the Patreon really blew up because of folks like yourself, I was kind of unsure as to what I was going to do, because, I had some ideas, but when I kind of announced the ideas, it was like, looking back even on the live stream when I announced what I was going to be doing for Patreon, even when I said what I was doing, I could hear in my voice that I was like not excited about it. If that makes any sense. And I really took a look in it myself.
There was something missing.
Yeah. I really took a look in myself and I was like, man, this is the same bullshit I've always done. Let's do something crazy that scares the shit out of me. And because of all the fine folks over on the Patreon who, 90% of them were fans of horror, I was like, well, what if I do a horror narration podcast on Patreon just for you guys? And Taped of Trepidation was born. It would not have happened, I don't think, without my collaborational efforts with the Grey Rooms, and then also with all of you guys in the community, all the roomies. So that started. It has been a wonderful journey that has been terrifying every step of the way, in the best way though. And it's a whole other creative outlet, because also I started to write horror a little before I started Tapes, of course, but like that whole, my creativity in the horror realm really got kicked off because of all that collaboration that happened and the confidence to do it. And folks like yourself saying like, no, like this is actually good. Like you've got something here. Like you're not crazy. You're not just screaming into the void, if that makes any sense. Like just, there's something here. And
yeah, collaborations bring you something sometimes you didn't know you needed.
Absolutely. Like, and knowing that it is normal to feel imposter syndrome, and it is normal to question yourself. And I mean, you and I've had this conversation where it's like, you can do things and feel kind of weird about it, if that makes sense. And that's okay, as long as you still do it. And then you know that, okay, even if I think this is weird, someone else might think this is really cool. And what's so fun about the whole horror narration thing is anytime I do something for the Hodder Show from the last 2 to 3 years, especially when I really got heavily into it, every Halloween or Christmas, anything I upload, especially last year, man, anything I upload that is horror narration related does like 4 times better than anything else I do for the Hodder Show. So I'm like,
It's a message.
yeah, I'm like, there's something here. There has to be.
Yeah.
There's proofs in the pudding, so to speak. So
Yep.
when, Tapes has been such a wonderful journey. And when I have creators that I really respect in the horror world saying things like, hey man, stop being a little bitch and just launch the show publicly because your shit's just as good as a lot of other stuff out there. And it's better than mine. His words, not mine.
Yep.
And it's a terrifying thought. And even though I love doing this, it was still just, I keep using the word terrifying, but it's I don't know way I can explain it. Like, yes, it's terrifying, it's horror content, but also the prospect of maybe this should be something everyone can hear. Maybe this is something. And I've kind of, I hemmed and hawed and went back and forth, and I ended up making the decision to end Tape of Trepidation on the Hodder Show Patreon. And it will now be a public podcast starting very soon. As we are,
Balloons popping.
terrifying skull balloons, covered in blood, whatever. No, but like this whole 8-year journey with the Hodder Show is so funny because like, if you told me 8 years ago that on the 8th year anniversary of the Hodder Show, that I never thought I'd actually get this far and that I'd be doing this long. And if you told me in 2016 that I would be on the verge of launching a horror narration podcast that I know is going to be pretty,
successful.
I know it's going to do pretty okay because I feel like I have something to offer. And I've been told that it's not just me saying that. So it's like, I would be like, dude, you're crazy. You're crazy. I'm in music. I'm never going to do that shit. And now here we are, I don't know if I want to give a date because but like it's coming. We're very close as you guys are hearing this.
Give us a date. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it.
Do it. Do it.
Do it.
Frig.
Do it.
You guys will hear Tapes of Trepidation for sure by or before March 15th.
Okay. We can do March
By
15th.
or before.
Okay.
Probably
Can do that.
before.
Okay.
Somewhere. If Tapes of Trepidation isn't launched by March 15th, I will give
I'm coming for you.
I will give Sam permission to drive over to Ontario and beat me up.
Yeah, that's a 15-hour drive or something? I'll take the time. I'll take the time off.
Whatever.
I can do that.
Come meet Luna and the kitties. It'll be great.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's so wild just to look back on everything and think that now this is where it is. And, the Hodder Show's not going anywhere. That's something I always stress. Like, I still have a very simple goal right now for the Hodder Show. There's one goal I want to achieve, and that's 500. I want to.
That's what I was going to ask. Where do you see the Hodder Show in like 1, 3, 5 years? Your goal is 500 for now.
In 3 years, for sure, I better be at 500 episodes. If not, I don't know what happened. Well, actually, no, that's actually pretty accurate. In the next 3 years, I will definitely hit 500 episodes, and I'm not going to stop unless I hit that goal. Once I hit that goal, I'm sure I'm not going to stop, but
anything can happen then.
I'm going to be at a very different point in my life in 3 years. At least I hope so.
That's true.
I'll be, 35 years old. Maybe I won't want to do the Hodder Show anymore. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But as of right now, that's the goal. It's been such a wonderful journey over the last 8 years. And I can't thank everyone enough for their support, especially those who have been with me from day one. And there's a few. But also to the people that, if this is your first time hearing the Hodder Show for some crazy reason, I don't know.
You have some 300 something episodes to listen
Lots
to.
of backlog stuff, guys. You can probably skip the first, I don't want to say 100 episodes, but the first probably 30, I think you can skip. But
it got better with
there's
time.
some really good, if it's not an interview or a music related episode, if it's just named something weird, just skip it. 'Cause that's just me talking, and those are not as fun unless it's an Ask Me Anything, which is a whole other concept. But yeah,
those are always fun. I'll admit, we've done that at Baseline, and it's super fun.
yeah. There's always and that's something that has been so funny with the show is like, even at this point in time, stuff's still growing and still new things happening, like the Ask Hodder Anything, like the fact that anytime I do those, like they're always so fun because it's interaction, but like they always do well download wise too. So I'm like, people like that stuff. It's fun to be at this point now where it's like 8 years in, I can still just have fun. I can do funny, crazy things that, hey, maybe they might work. Maybe they not might work. Jesus,
He can't talk
I can't
anymore.
talk no more. I can do like, the albums that made me, which is a wonderful segment I love doing that people have really enjoyed. I can try something like Hodder's Hits and Misses, which was a fucking huge miss. I can do things and just have fun. And that's what it's all about. That's one thing you guys should take away from this conversation, folks, is just have fun with what you're doing creatively, because if you're not having fun, no one else will.
So yeah, the goal is always to have fun, whether you do this for like 1, 3, or 5 years, or your goal of 500. But like you said, having fun when doing a project is the utmost important thing, I think.
Definitely. And that's anytime someone asks me, for advice on starting a podcast or whatever, the first thing I always say is never stop having fun with it. Because if you stop having fun with it, what's the point? And for the love of God, record in bulk and stay ahead. That's number 2.
Oh yeah, stay ahead.
Stay
That's
ahead.
a good thing.
Have things ready to go. If you're doing seasons, that's fine. But for the love of God, have that season ready to go when you launch, because you never know what can happen. And before you know it, this is not going to take anyone or anything, but it's like, I've been there where it's like, oh, I'm fine. I could edit things last minute. And it's like, oh God, you're just screaming. You're trying to edit quickly. And no, don't do that.
Yeah. And the next thing you know, you have 8 years behind you. Ta-da!
Which, listen, if I can do it, anyone in the world can do it, because I never had any business doing this. In a lot of ways, I still think I don't, but that's neither here nor there. And, you can, if you really want to do something and you have a love for it, you can truly do anything you set your mind to. And I think that I'm an example of that, because as someone who, to get sentimental for a second, like as someone who, has a learning disability and who never was great with talking with people, and who sometimes can just get lost in something, can ramble on aimlessly for a while and have no idea what I'm talking about myself. Like, the fact that I'm still here doing this and that some people enjoy it, like, that's really cool. And so long as you have a love for what you're doing and you can be passionate about it, you're a success. And that's truly how I see things now. If you love what you're doing, you are already a success at it, no matter what it is.
I totally agree with that. And to finish this interview, why don't we finish with a funny little quiz?
Oh, geez.
There's a quiz that exists. It was first started by Bernard Pivot. He was a French interviewer. Then James Lipton, who used to do Actor Studio, did the same in English. It's called Rapid Fire. You answer with, if possible, one word only.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite word?
Probably fuck.
Okay. What is your least favorite word?
My favorite word is actually probably catharsis. Just to go back for a second.
Okay.
What's that word I can't pronounce ever, no matter how many times I try?
Oh, you said it early. Particularly?
Yeah, I can't pronounce particularly.
You have to take a lot of time
Probably.
to spell
There's
it
certain
out.
words that especially when I'm narrating something or reading something, I'll be like, I just can't pronounce that word no matter how hard I try. Cool, okay. So yeah, probably particularly.
What turns you on creatively? Or turns you on, period?
Lol. Bacon cheeseburgers. No.
Ooh.
My beautiful wife.
Yes, that's really good. Hi, Sam.
Being honest. What turns me on creatively? I think just being able to be expressive no matter what I'm doing. Being able to just be expressive. Trying to keep these short.
What turns you... So, contrary, what turns you off?
Having to overthink things too much.
Yeah, that's called anxiety.
Yeah, if I have to sit and, I mean, it's like what's happening right now with tape repetition. I'm sitting on episodes and I'm listening back through them and I go, I'm so proud of this. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. So it's having to sit with things creatively, I guess.
Okay, I get that. What is your favorite curse word?
Fuck. You can use it.
Definitely.
It has so many uses.
So many. What sound or noise do you love?
Apparently it's because I do it a lot. But honestly, my favorite noise or sound in the world is probably my wife's voice. If I'm being honest. Followed by super nasty guitar riffs.
What sound or noise do you hate?
And the sound of my own voice. Yes.
Really?
Which surprises a lot of people. But yeah.
This is the sound of silence, which you heard.
Yes.
But no one ever loves the sound of their own voice because what we put out and what we hear are two totally different
things. Yeah. And that's what people may not understand. Like even like with like the Hodder Show is a little different, but it's like, you know, like with tape trepidation, it's like, man, I EQ the shit out of my voice. That's not raw. Are you kidding me? I don't go crazy, but like if it was just this all the time, like, are you kidding me? No one wants to listen to that. Come on, man. It can be a little rough sometimes, but that's okay.
Yeah, been doing that 21 years. I know something about it. And to end this, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Really, bro? What the fuck are you doing here? Really? Or just a slow clap. Just...
Maybe a guitar riff.
Or
at the
you know
same
what?
time.
Or just a super nasty guitar riff. Just something crazy.
Welcome.
Some crazy guitar riff.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's that.
Awesome. Well, TJ, thank you for being on your own show.
Thank you.
And thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you for asking them. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm very grateful to have had you kind of, even though I still rambled on aimlessly for a while, it's like have you kind of be the steering the ship a little bit.
MC.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, almost like emceeing, basically.
Exactly. So this was your Hodder Show for the 8th anniversary, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Seema. I appreciate it.
Thank you.